Hello, welcome back everyone. This time we have Van from Google. We have a demo on the results viewer for the OCP TV output. Um, I think the plan, and if you could please confirm for me, Van, is that you would open source this thing so that it is available to the community.
Yeah, we should be able to move this over to GitHub. So before that, we just have a few items to check. But we thought that is already stable enough to do a demo first before we actually move the code to GitHub. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to start on the demo and maybe a quick self intro for everyone here, that would be nice. We don't have a time limit that strict for the demo, so if you want to take like 20 minutes, half an hour, you think that's enough, it should be okay.
Yeah, sure. I'll just use the slide, but most of it will still be the live demo. So I'm from the Google Cloud team. So my teammate Ronnie is also here. He also helped me a lot during the OCP DAG result viewer development. So today we'll be introducing to you this result viewer service that have already been used in Google. And the objective of this service is to present the DAG result, which is in JSON format, in human readable format. So it is already being used in various ways in Google. It can be a CLI tool to generate the HTML report of a test run result. Um, Recently, we also launched it as a web service hosted on Google Cloud Storage and Google App Engine. And for developers who want to enhance on the tool, they can also use it as a local dev server to view changes. So I will quickly show you the actual service. So this is the current link because we use the Google App Engine. So this is format of the URL. When you go to the homepage, there'll be a form for you to choose the test result file to upload to the service. And if it is a valid OCP format, then you'll be redirected to the results in HTML format. And as you can see, there's the test run view with the basic information. If there's any errors, they'll be shown here. And you can also use the test steps and go into the detail of each test step. You can view the diagnosis. If there's any measurements, they'll be shown here, or any measurement series. And he also view the hardware information of the component that is being reported by this measurement. So all these are being transformed from the original JSON format into a human readable format. One very useful feature is to view all the logs emitted by this DAG. And you can also filter by the severity of the log. So let's say if there's any error logs, then it should show up in the error filter. I could try to show, yeah, this is an example log of a diagram with some error. So if you filter by error, then the error and also fatal logs will show. Yeah, and you can also search it by some phrase. So you can also use the CLI tool to generate the exact same UI we just saw. So let's say if you prefer to use the command line instead of the form on the home page, the CLI tool will provide the share command, and it will output the resulting URL to lead to the web page. Besides that, you can also generate an HTML report file using the CLI tool. So this will generate a local HTML file and you can share with other people easily. You can also serve this HTML file by a local HTTP server. So in Google, we managed to integrate this OCP direct result viewer with a internal UI service that is widely used to fetch the results of a test run. So in the beginning, our internal UI service already fetched the standard output file of a DIAC. And what we did is we created an entry point for the OCP DIAC result viewer to step in, grab that standard output file, then it will upload to its own Google Cloud Storage bucket, and then generate the link and send that link to the Internet UI service. So the human looking at the Internet UI service would be directly able to access the SCP direct result viewer from the UI of the Internet service. So previously, all they saw was the actual JSON file, and they might need to download that file or and then use the CLI tool to view it as an HTML page. But after we launched the standalone web service on Google Cloud Storage, then now they can skip all the middle steps and directly go to the website to view the HTML page. So under the hood, OCP direct result viewer uses the hash of the content of the file as the file name. We use SHA 256, which is strong enough to prevent duplicates so that we can prevent malicious players to guess a resource name without knowing the actual file content. Besides that, we also have an allow list of the recognized domains. So currently we allow like some internal Google Cloud Storage buckets in Google, but once we open source the tool, we also can add other companies' internal storage into our allow list. We also implement the SSO authentication to make sure only people who are allowed to use to see the resource will be able to access them. So there are some action items before we can release the code to GitHub. We, as you can see from the live demo just now, we were calling it Melton Result Viewer, so that's our internal name for the tool. So we need to rebrand the whole UI to OCP Direct Result Viewer to align with this open source spirit. And we'll review for any information leakage before we make the code open source. If there's any questions on the floor, I will be happy to take them.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This looks very nice. I can start with a couple of questions, and I'm sure other people in the call will have as well. So my first question is this only a service, or can it be integrated into other things? Like the idea that I was getting from Dan was that you can use it as a standalone to build that HTML page, which basically looks like the website that you showed live, right? And then you can share that HTML page as a standalone thing where you look at the results.
Yeah, so the code includes also the command to build the CLI. So that's what you can see here. I think this is the one you are referring to. The code can build the CLI as a binary, and then you can just run that binary to output an HTML file. So that HTML file can be shared to other people.
All right. Okay. So we can use it as a binary, basically, the way you show it here, to just make the HTML file.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think that answers my question. Before I continue, go ahead, Vincent. Can take turns.
Yeah, I have a few questions as well, but on this one, Adrian, that was a good question. A related one, Van, and first of all, thank you so much for the great demonstration. It's a really great looking tool. If you run a diag, do you actually get to see any output while the diag is running, or do you need to wait for the end of the diag to generate this output?
Currently, this service will expect the whole complete run. So we still are expecting, let's say there's a test run start, test run end. So yeah, currently it expects the whole complete run. So there's no streaming functionality at this moment.
Is that something planned or not in scope at the moment?
At the moment we haven't planned it yet. I can see whether there's a use case for that, or there's a a way for us to integrate into our service for that, because at this point our internet UI also doesn't have that streaming of the log, I believe. But
Okay.
I believe after, maybe after we open source it, it's also possible for other external parties to clone the repository and do the editing by themselves, if let's say there's a functionality that they believe is suitable for their own use case. Then I believe
Sure.
it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I'll ask other questions later. I'll let others go first.
Yep, sure. Thank you.
Go ahead, Satish. We'll take each question at a time.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Again, yeah, it's a nice feature, and this is really going to make people's life easier. The one question, I think, probably going back to the same question as Adrian, I just want to confirm. So there is no way that this tool can be integrated with DIAX, meaning I cannot run the diagnostics which provides this HTML output, right? I will get a JSON output and then I have to pass it via this tool to get HTML output.
Yeah, so currently that's the use case is we already have the JSON output.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you just confirm, are you also referring to like if let's say you have a partial JSON and you want to use this service, is that right?
Not the partial JSON. I mean, I can wait for the diag to complete, but I don't want to do two-step process. Like when I run the diag, like the output should be an HTML already. I don't want to grab the JSON output and feed it into this tool to get the HTML. Like it's a two-step process, which is fine. I'm just wondering if this tool is going to be a library at some point, then we can just integrate into our tool and then provide the HTML output right away.
I see. So it's kind of a part of the DIAG in a way. Is that right?
Right, exactly.
Oh, I see. I see. That's a very interesting suggestion. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. We can. I'll take it down first, and I'll see
Sounds good.
what we can do about it. Thank you so
Sounds
much.
good. Sounds good. Maybe I'll just one more. This tool is in the backend is like is it Golang or Python or HTML? I mean, I don't know how this UI work.
Yeah, for the web service, the backend is the Flask
That's
Flask server, so it's Python.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll continue with another question then. I'm gonna go a bit more technical. What is exactly planned on your side on being open sourced, and what language, what kind of maintenance model do you expect for this in the open source space?
For the later part, do you mean like whether we plan to do any further change or maintenance, like let's say upgrade to the
So
technique?
for example, when I say maintenance, I mean some sort of ownership of the repo. A simple example would be if you get PRs from other collaborators, right? Is there anyone to merge those PRs and review them, for example?
Yeah. Mm, since I'm currently working on open sourcing it, I would be happy to see any pull requests and yeah, for now, I should be the one to do the part. But of course, we have other developers in Google who should be able to review the request as well. So since we're open sourcing it, I don't see a problem in seeing pull requests from external developers. Or they are also welcome to clone the repository and make their own changes to it, make their own improvements to it.
Right. I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything right now. So if there's a later answer that is available for this, that's also fine. I'm just interested to see that, you know, we'll have a healthy repository that's that we can use here. On the fork model, I'm personally not that convinced that we want to have different forks. Of course, that's open because it's open source, but ideally, like if we have contributions, we should put them in the same place, right? That's the whole point of collaborating.
Okay. Yeah, I get.
And back to my first question then, like with the language and the content, could you share more detail of what exactly will be open source based on your presentation, like what we've seen so far?
So for the service, we have a front end which is in TypeScript, and we have the back end written in Python. So all those two parts should be open sourced.
I see. So this whole service you're planning on open sourcing.
Yeah, because the back end also includes the part to generate the CARI, the binary. So yeah, we still need to review the whole code, but at this point, I think both the back end and front end we will be able to to open source them.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers my question. Go ahead, Vincent. I'll continue after you.
Yeah, so Adrian is asking all the hard questions. I'll go back to something a little lighter. I was curious, Van, is this mobile friendly? So I have a few related questions, sort of the rendering of this. When you generate the output, does the HTML have all the CSS embedded in it, or is there any dependencies to stylize sort of the output? And then I have a quick follow-up question on the security, but I'm curious about sort of the configuration of the visualization here.
Yeah, so for the CSS part, we are using the Material UI. Is that what you're
Yeah, I'm
referring to?
curious, like when you generate this HTML output, is it fully self-contained in terms of styling it, and is it mobile friendly, or do you need to embed that in your web server to sort of make it look and render it differently? How much comes along when you run this utility and generate this HTML?
I believe the HTML is self-contained, so the CSS should be in the HTML file. That's what I think at the top of my head right now. So
Okay.
as for the mobile friendliness, unfortunately, we have quite a few tables in the view, so it's still optimal to view it on a white screen instead of a mobile screen. Although I'll be happy to see recommendations on how we can make it more mobile friendly.
Okay, yeah, and I was just curious. We've run into similar issues. Quick one on the security one. You had a slide about the SHA-256. Could you actually explain exactly what is being hashed here? Yeah.
Yeah, so when we have a file and we want to upload it into our own GCS bucket, we need to find a way to name the file. So what we're doing now is just hash the content of the whole file and then use it as the name.
So you're not talking about the output itself. Are you talking about artifacts generated by a test? So that's what I'm trying to understand. Or is it of the HTML file itself?
It's referring to the okay, let me
So I think this is the way you index the files, right?
Yeah, so the content of the file is the same as the output from the DAC, but we have to upload it to our own storage. So we would kind of rename the file, and if so in this like use case in Google, that's this first step, the fourth step. When we upload to our own GCS bucket, that's when we have to rename the file. So it won't be the original file of the DAC. It will be a new name generated by us. So that's where the hash comes in.
Can I interject here, maybe for you, Vincent? And correct me if I'm wrong, Van, but the reason why you're renaming these is that the file names should not be guessable if someone just goes and tries to guess a URL. And specifically, these file names are generated because this acts as a service. So this has nothing to do with the HTML renderer to a single file. The service, when you have a URL saying, okay, I want to look at this result, will have this SHA encoded based on the contents of the JSON instead of the original file name that you had. Does that make more sense, Vincent?
I think this seems very much like a sort of what I would say basic file transfer integrity validation, right? It's got nothing to do with a requirement. It's not about validating any form of output. That's what I was trying to differentiate. Whether that had something to do with the content of the DIAG output as opposed to, or of the artifacts generated by the DIAGs. But it sounds like this is pure file transfer integrity.
Yeah, the name doesn't have any validation value to the content.
Yeah. So in other words, this isn't so much about the DIAG output. It's about the service for visualizing the output, right? So if, for example, I were to pilot this and use the result viewer to generate an HTML, I wouldn't really, this security aspect, this hash doesn't come in the picture, right? I can actually take this CLI, run it, generate an HTML, and basically I'm on my own. I don't need, there's nothing mandating that the security hash matches. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part?
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is whether this SHA-256 integrity is something that is part of the CLI, or is it part of actually the service on the back end? And my understanding is it's part of the service in the back end when the file is transferred. So in other words, if I just take the CLI and run it on a DIAG that we've run here internally, I could run the SHA validation, but that's on my own how I want to do the checksum, right? It's not a requirement of the CLI utility. I don't know if I'm clear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not the core requirement of a CLI. Although I'm not sure if you only have the CLI, whether you'll be able to change the internet hash, because the CLI is also built from the code itself. So let's say if you don't want to use SHA 256, you can change the code and build your own CLI if that's what you are getting it. But the hash is built into the back end of the server, so it's not really the core functionality. It's just an extra layer of safety. But it's not a core feature. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
If you're thinking of the CLI as the bit that makes the HTML file and nothing else, and the rest as a service, these are two different things.
Yeah.
In terms of usage, at least, not necessarily the code. I think, Ronnie, you're first. I can go after both of you.
Yeah, about the hash, we decide the hash because we want to share the link to others. For example, you can upload your resource and you get a URL, then share to others to view the results. So we need a share link that that cannot be guessable.
Go ahead, Karen.
Van and Ronnie. So basically, if this 256 hash or whatever is that relevant outside of Google? I think that's the question which Vincent and Adrian are looking. So do I also understand correctly that you can run the standalone, you rename it, you name it to whatever HTML file and you're done, right? The hash is not in the picture at all. Is that as a standalone external? Is that correct?
Could you repeat the last?
Yeah, what I'm asking, or at least my understanding also, is that outside of Google, the renaming of the file using the hash is not relevant. We care about just running the tool, getting a HTML output, and sharing it, whatever, right? We are not really looking to upload anywhere. There's no service outside of Google in a standalone scenario. Is that correct? So
Yeah,
this
so
is necessarily a Google internal detail. Do I understand that correctly?
um um outside of Google, let's say if in any scenario like when we share this link and it's lead to anyone that should not have seen it in, like from the original file, sometimes it's possible to guess, another result. I think that's also one of the point, and also the other is because we are uploading it to the GCS bucket, so we need to make sure that the test results it should be unique. So the hash is also a very convenient way to make sure that the same test result should not be overwritten by another
So
test result.
are you saying that even if I just use this standalone Melton result viewer HTML dash O, is it still contacting the Google Cloud Service?
Oh, you mean are you talking about the CLI tool?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it will, because it will talk to it would it will actually call our backend to get the URL, and the backend will also upload this result to the Google Cloud Storage.
So the CLI is not self-contained. It's just a thin client for the backend API.
Yeah, it's still just a replacement of the website itself, but it will still talk to okay, let me clarify. So my apologies. So there are a few functionalities. This one is the one that will talk to our web service backend, the share command. But this one, HTML or serve, they are self-contained. These two, you are not talking to the Google Cloud Storage. Only this one, the share command, you will talk to the Google Cloud Storage. Yeah.
I think that answers your question as well, Karen, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, thanks, Karen, for helping clarify. I think I'm clear as well now. So this is a form of making the files unique and some form of obfuscation. So I think I'm pretty clear. There's no. I wanted to clarify whether there was an embedded expectation on the security, but so I'm pretty clear now. Thanks, Van, for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Also, one thing, if when open sourcing, maybe we should just cut out this share part. I don't know if it's really relevant. It might me just confuse. We can probably, I think, copy borrow that out. I'm thinking.
Okay, let me take that down and yeah. I'll talk to Ronnie about this. Let me take note of this first.
Just on even if you take down the web service, are there scenarios where there might be people open sourcing that would want to have the SHA-256? It mightn't be exactly your use case, but having an interface that they could create it themselves might be useful. Because they're sharing in a similar reason why you're sharing this information with others.
Do you mean some people might take away the hash part?
No, what I'm thinking is that so we don't see the value in GCS web service at the moment, but there may be people that would need to have the SHA-256 for the file name, maybe because they do see a uniqueness in the file name, and it's as good as any other approach that you can take, or they are going to share externally and they don't want to share some metadata about the contents, that there can be use cases for what's been created here, even if it isn't the use case that's presented. Vincent or Adrian, if you have any thoughts.
Let me continue with one of my questions because it's relevant to this current topic. So if you're sharing this in open source as a service, and basically you will have the backend and the front end that could be hosted on some arbitrary hosting service, right? It could just be an Nginx on a host, right? Would this still have a dependency on GCS as an external service? And if so, do you need to provide your own credentials and all of that? Or is that thing abstracted away, like the storage part?
Yes, so currently the credentials are still kind of hard-coded in it. So we need to review the code before we release to open source, because I think
No, credential is not in the Git. Credential is not in the Git. We put it in secret manager.
Oh, okay.
Right, but my question stands if you have a hard dependency on GCS.
Actually, we don't have a hard dependency on GCS because we can we design a class to wrap the storage class. So if you want to use S3 or other Azure storage, you can implement you can implement the class to support other backend storage. Yeah.
Okay.
We support local storage and GCS for now.
That answers my question exactly. Thank you. Go ahead, Kieran.
Yeah, I had a question. So is the service part useful as an open source tool, or is the standalone part primarily what people would be interested in? Like when Van said that there is a front end and the back end part, is the back end part really useful here as a if we are not looking to share? Or I just wanted
So
to
let
understand.
me chime in on that one, Karen, from a non-Google perspective. So when you raised the question of, maybe this should be separate, I think there's definitely a distinction between the CLI as we've established and sort of the back end. But the whole backend piece ties to something we've talked about quite a bit in this forum. It's around how do we get to share the diagnostics, and can we build a sort of repo of diagnostics? And I think it's a much broader topic, right? I mean, fundamentally, this ability that is demoed to share, if we have everybody that runs an OCP diag be willing to share in a common repo, that was one of the objectives we had outlined a year or two ago in building this kind of centralized database of diags. But I think it's a broader topic that we would want to discuss, around naming, there's probably additional metadata that may come from what would be needed to be collected, what are kind of some of the security aspects. So I think feature-wise, it's relevant, but I don't think in its current form, it makes sense to say, yes, it's all going to land in in this particular backend. We would want to discuss that one a little bit more. But I definitely see a value in it in the long run. But we need to commit to where we're going to host this and what qualifies as a diag that is fully anonymized or obfuscated to not sort of expose any sensitive information. That's my take. I wanted to.
Let me interject that for a second, Vincent, and thanks for your view on that. This is a very nice building block, actually, in the longer term plans. Because as you say, the discussion was to both have a classification of diags and availability of diags, but also outputs. And we currently actually have some sample outputs in the main repo, which are used for validation for the validator. But if we can actually host this as a separate service somewhere else and hook it into the picture, as in this is the diag and these are sample outputs that you may get from this diag if you're interested in seeing, on this run on various hardware or whatever, then this by itself would also be useful along with the CLI that we can integrate in something else.
I think I understand the long-term utility and stuff, but it certainly looks like there's a lot of thought in terms of how they have to be shared and metadata organization stuff. When this thing is being open sourced, do we still want to retain this component or put that for later? I think we can, going by what you are saying, what you both are saying, we can share it with probably any code changes required to maybe use an S3 bucket or whatever of that sort. So individual users, companies can probably have their implementations of their share, and maybe the initial use case would probably be for internal sharing before it lands into an organized open repo of direct diagnosis outputs.
I think your question is for Ronnie or Van, right?
No, it's actually to you and Vincent. So basically, what I'm saying is, you both are saying that there is value in being able to share, but the nice repo of organized data output, diagnostic output, it's a lot more design and thought. So we are not there yet. For the interim, this share can be used in a more limited manner within organizations. So maybe value is still there in sharing it, and individual companies have to sort of override to use S3 or whatever other cloud buckets.
So I'm a bit confused by your question. Like, are you asking if this has value for other users, for example, us
Yes.
at Meta, in
Yes.
terms of the service?
Yes.
My answer, like I said a minute ago, is definitely yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree, I completely agree. But I also agree with you, Karen, that this from a design consideration may require additional discussion. I would understand that it's not something that's been broadly discussed. If we can choose what backend and what gets shared and some of the details of how it gets shared, this would be kind of the interface to this service, right? Right now, there's a lot of assumptions. I mean, they are baked in because it's been designed for an internal use case. But what we would want if we were to leverage this service is for the user to say, yes, I'm going to share this against this endpoint with these security credentials, and here's the kind of renaming scheme I'm going to apply. And that's the kind of level of expectations we'd have to leverage it. But yeah, ideally, if it fulfilled that, this presents a lot of value, because we could choose whether we're going to share it to an internal backend storage, or we share it in a more public OCP, hosted repo. There's definitely value, but it could be phased for sure. The CLI itself is kind of the P0, the most important functionality we want, and this would definitely be very useful later.
So Ronnie already mentioned that the storage layer has an abstraction on top of it, so it doesn't necessarily need to be GCS. However, so I believe, based on that there are similar concepts in the code base, although I haven't seen it yet. But all of this discussion in terms of extracting value out of it would happen after we see the code base, right? It is initially useful to actually have everything available before we can go on and say, okay, we're gonna derive a different product out of this for this classification of diags and outputs, or repurpose this for that different use case. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it makes sense.
All right, I'll go with another more technical question. I was asking Dan on the email if there's a technical reason why this needs to sit in a separate Git repo. I don't know if you have the answer to this, Ben, but it's worth asking, because my initial idea was that this would go into the main repo with the spec and validator and whatnot. So you'd also have like the result viewer in there. But Dan was asking to make a new repo for it. Do you know why?
I'm not sure actually. Probably just for professional person, but at the top of my head, I don't see any security or specific reasons for that. If you think it's okay to be for it to be in the existing repo, maybe we can just confirm with Dan again.
Go ahead, Karan.
Yeah, I don't think we have had a very specific reason to put it in a separate repo. You mentioned about the capybara thing. I was briefly looking yesterday, and it does look powerful enough for us to be able to put it into an existing repo. If that's a better fit, I think we can explore that.
So we had this discussion on a different repo. This is exactly why I'm asking, right? When Dylan was around and we were talking about the set diag, if I remember correctly, he had to make a number of changes to Capybara in order to be able to export to a folder inside the repo. And the PRs were kind of looking not optimal and all of that. So out of that discussion, it came out that it's easier if you want to export code through Capybara to go through a whole new repo like by itself than a folder inside an existing repo. So that's why I'm asking, like, if this may actually be a reason for this new repo. Because if it is, it's fine. Like, we can make a new repo. I'm just curious to see why.
Yeah, I haven't looked into Capybara enough, but from what I've looked, it should be possible. I think what we will probably do is to explore what it takes to move it into the existing OCP core repo. If it's unsurmountable difficulties, we'll probably switch to using a separate repo. Is that reasonable?
Okay. I mean, both cases are fine as far as I'm concerned. We can move stuff later on as well.
Okay. I think one thing which we have to consider here is that there will be two-way contributions. I expect this to be a little more active. I think this particular thing. So, how does the two-way contribution model work? Or I think we have to think through that. Do we make all our fresh contributions in the external GitHub repo and vendor them in, or figure out a way to handle patches both ways, PRs? That we'll have to sort of figure that part out, I think.
So from our side, I know a couple of people inside Meta who are interested in contributing to this. And because we are working on GitHub, basically all of the changes would happen through PRs, as far as I can tell. So, the general pattern of forking the repo and pushing a PR back to upstream.
Correct. So we have to figure out how that would work with. I think that's internal to us. I think we'll have to figure that part out. And in case a separate repo makes it more convenient, we'll have to see that part.
Okay. All right. If you need any help or if you need any discussion, feel free to let me know. I have one more question, but I think we still have time, so go ahead.
Hey, yeah, a couple light questions, Van, on the performance of this, and I'd love to play with it to see, but how long does it take typically to generate this HTML output from a performance standpoint?
So far, I have yet to see a result big enough that takes maybe like more than 2 seconds.
Okay.
So far, I don't have any experience regarding the performance.
Okay, so conceivably you wouldn't be concerned doing it on demand, so you wouldn't actually persist the HTML file. You could generate it, render it, and then dispose of it, right?
Oh, what do you mean dispose of it, sir?
Well, that's the other thing. It's maybe too detailed a question, but do you know, like, if you have an X kilobyte file for the JSON output, what's the number of times this is larger than the JSON output? I would imagine it's substantially larger.
Yeah, I guess currently, I'm not sure if this answers the question, but currently our traffic is not high enough to actually makes a big difference in my experience.
So you
So
persist, you just
yeah.
generate the output and you store this output, and you keep both. You keep the JSON output and this output.
Oh, the HTML file is not being cached anyway. It's just the JSON output. Does that answer your question?
Wait, the HTML file is stored on the GCS server, right? That's what serves the output, right?
Oh no, that's just the JSON output. The HTML file is generated based on the JSON output, but we don't store the HTML
Oh, you
file
don't
on the
store it. Okay. Okay, you just generate it and serve it.
Yeah.
Ah,
So now
okay.
it's being done on demand. So we don't have enough traffic yet to actually create like a substantial lag in the generation.
I see.
Because not that many people are using it at the same time, but it's being generated on demand. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got it.
Thank you.
If you want to go ahead quickly, Kieran.
Yeah. So Vincent, were you looking at this quick multiple users as a way to use it in a streaming mode? Is that what you had in mind? Because I think
I think the streaming mode is something we're going to want to look at, because during development in NPI, the one topic that we come back to is we want a solution that people become familiar with, right? And so having different output formats, different ways to interpret output is
I think I don't know the implementation. Van should say better, but we might be expecting a fully complete, structured, probably a test run and might be required. I don't know if we are able.
Yeah.
Van, do you know if we require a complete output or it can interpret what it's already seen?
Yeah. Currently, we expect uh the whole run. So
Okay.
if you want to be able to see partial result, it's still possible. We have to be a bit more flexible in the code. Uh, but at this point, we are expecting to see the whole test run. Yeah.
I think the ability to be able to interpret and display a partial output will be a useful addition, I think.
Okay.
We can sort of maybe the streaming thing could come later, but if this is performant enough that you could quickly interpret like a portion of it and then on demand you refresh it and after 5 or 10 seconds repeat that, I think that will be useful.
Okay. Got it.
So let me get back to the most important question. And I know this came as a barrage of questions, Van, but this is very interesting and I think it warrants a lot of discussion. What should we expect for a timeline?
We were looking at maybe like in 1 month to open source, but if we want to have some additional feature, for example, supporting the partial output, I might need to adjust the ETA, but I think we can expect, for now, we can expect in the next 1 month.
All right, so I think the first priority would be to make it available, right? And then we can discuss other additional features if that's the case. And on top of that, it could also be easier to implement additional features if there are other collaborators to the open source one. In my opinion, right? So
Okay. Yeah, in that case, I think it's safe to say we can open source it in a month's time.
okay, so approximately we're kind of looking at that. We don't have any hard deadlines, expectations or anything like that. Okay, so we're kind of 4 minutes away from the end of the hour. I think we are done with the questions. I hope we are done with the questions. Thank you again very much, Van. This was a very interesting demo, and it will be very nice to contribute on this project. And thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you so much.